She was just a waitress struggling to make ends meet. He was a billionaire with a past no one knew about. But when she saw her mother's picture in his wallet, everything she thought she knew about her life changed forever. The diner was packed, the usual crowd of tired workers, truck drivers, and families filling every booth. Olivia balanced a tray of steaming coffee cups, dodging customers as she made her way to a table in the corner. She had worked here for years, barely making enough to cover rent, but she had no choice. This job was all she had. At the far end of the diner, a man sat alone. Unlike the usual customers, he didn't fit in. His tailored suit, expensive watch, and air of quiet authority made it obvious he was rich. No, not just rich, powerful. Olivia forced a polite smile as she approached. "Good evening, sir. Can I get you something?" The man barely looked up. "Coffee? Black?" She nodded and turned to leave, but as she did, something caught her eye. His wallet was open on the table, and inside, tucked between crisp $100 bills and sleek business cards, was an old, faded photograph of her mother. Olivia froze. Her heart pounded as she stared at the familiar face in the picture. How was this possible? She swallowed hard, forcing herself to speak. "Hi, sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" The man's hand, which had been casually resting on the table, suddenly tensed. Slowly he lifted his gaze, his sharp blue eyes locking onto hers for the first time. There was something in his expression, a flicker of shock, a hint of something deeper. For a long moment, he didn't say a word. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "What's your name?" Olivia's breath hitched. Why did it feel like he already knew? Olivia's pulse raced. Why would a billionaire have her mother's picture? She swallowed hard. "My name is Olivia Hayes." The man's expression changed instantly. His eyes darkened, his jaw clenched, and for a brief moment he looked like he had seen a ghost. Olivia's stomach twisted. What was happening? "You're sure?" he asked, his voice quieter now. She frowned. "Of course I'm sure. Why would I lie about my own name?" He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. For the first time since she walked up to his table, he looked unsettled. Olivia glanced at the picture again, her heart pounding. It was old, creased and slightly faded, like it had been carried around for years. She finally broke the silence. "Where did you get that?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled the photo from his wallet, holding it carefully between his fingers, like it was something precious. "This woman," he said slowly, "where is she now?" Olivia's throat tightened. She hated that question. "She passed away years ago," she admitted, barely above a whisper. The man's grip on the picture tightened. For a moment, he looked like the air had been knocked out of him. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. Olivia had no idea what to say. She didn't even know why she was still standing there. Then, he looked at her again. And when he spoke, his next words sent a chill down her spine. "Olivier, your mother was the love of my life." She felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "What?" she whispered. He placed the picture gently on the table. Her name was Emily, wasn't it? Olivia's heart nearly stopped. How did he know that? The man took a deep breath. "She was everything to me, and I lost her." Olivia stared at him, her mind spinning. This wasn't possible. "You knew my mother?" she asked, her voice barely steady. The man's gaze softened. "I didn't just know her, Olivia. I loved her." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Who was this man? And more importantly, what did he know about her mother that she didn't? Olivia's hands trembled as she pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. She needed answers. "You loved my mother?" she repeated, barely able to believe the words. The man nodded slowly. "A long time ago." His voice was different now, not the cold, powerful tone of a billionaire used to getting his way. It was raw, personal, almost broken. "My name is Alexander Grayson," he said. "Your mother and I, we were together before I became the man I am today." Olivia's mind raced. She had never heard his name before. Her mother had never mentioned a billionaire from her past. She clenched her fists. If you loved her, why weren't you there? Why didn't I ever hear about you? Alexander exhaled, running a hand over his face. Because I lost her. His voice was thick with emotion. And I didn't even know she had a daughter. Olivia's breath hitched. Was he saying he never knew she existed? That doesn't make sense, she said, shaking her head. She raised me alone. She struggled. She worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. If you cared about her, why did she have to go through that? Alexander's eyes darkened. He looked like a man carrying the weight of regret. She left me, he admitted. And I never knew why. He leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. Until now. Olivia's chest tightened. What do you mean? He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward her. It was an old email from Emily Hayes. Olivia's breath caught as she read the words. Alexander, I can't stay. I have to protect my baby. Please don't look for me. The date on the email was exactly 9 months before Olivia was born. Her vision blurred. No, that couldn't be right. She looked up at Alexander, her pulse hammering in her ears. You're lying, she whispered. You're saying... His expression softened, but his voice was steady. Olivia, I think I'm your father. The diner spun around her. Her entire life, she had believed she was alone, that her mother had raised her on her own, struggling, fighting for every dollar. And now, sitting in front of her, was a man who could have changed everything. A man who claimed to be her father. Tears burned at the back of her eyes. Was it true? Could it be? And if it was, why had her mother kept it a secret? Olivia's hands gripped the edge of the table as her heart pounded. This couldn't be real. Her whole life she had believed it was just her and her mom against the world. Now, this man, a billionaire, was sitting in front of her, claiming to be her father? She shook her head. No, my mom would have told me. She wouldn't have kept this from me. Alexander's eyes were filled with something she couldn't quite place. Regret? Pain? Hope? She never told me either, he said quietly. If she had, do you really think I wouldn't have looked for you? Olivia's throat tightened. That email. The words burned in her mind. I have to protect my baby. Please don't look for me. She swallowed hard. If you're telling the truth, why would she run? What was she protecting me from? Alexander exhaled slowly. That's what I've been trying to figure out for years. She studied him carefully. He wasn't like the rich men she had seen on TV, arrogant, untouchable. There was something real in his eyes, something broken. A million emotions crashed over her at once. Anger, confusion, curiosity. Her voice came out quieter this time. You really didn't know about me? Alexander shook his head. Not until today. She didn't want to believe him. She wanted to scream that he was lying, that this was some cruel joke. But, deep inside, a tiny voice whispered that it made sense. She had always wondered why her mother never talked about the past, why she had never mentioned Olivia's father. Was this the truth her mother had tried to bury? Alexander cleared his throat, pulling something from his wallet. He set it on the table and slid it toward her. It was another picture, but this time not just of her mother. It was her mother and him. Younger, happier, in love. Olivia felt something crack deep inside her. Her mother had never looked at any man the way she looked at the one in the picture. She felt lightheaded, lost. Her entire world had just changed in an instant. She looked back up at Alexander, her voice shaking. What do you want from me? His gaze softened. To know my daughter. Olivia's chest tightened. Daughter? She had spent her whole life believing she didn't have a father. Now she had to ask herself the one question she never thought she'd face. Did she want to know him? Olivia's fingers trembled as she stared at the picture. Her mother and Alexander, younger, happier, together. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a lie. Her mother had loved this man, and now he was sitting in front of her, calling her his daughter. She swallowed the lump in her throat. You want to know me? Her voice was unsteady. You had your whole life to find me, but you didn't. Alexander exhaled. Because I didn't know you existed. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of desperation underneath. Olivia, I had nothing when I met your mother. No company, no billions, just a dream. We planned a future together until one day she disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation. Olivia shook her head. It didn't make sense. Her mother had struggled to raise her alone. Why would she run from a man who clearly cared about her? She didn't disappear, Olivia whispered. She was working double shifts, skipping meals so I could eat. She was here, fighting for every single day. Her voice cracked. Where were you? Alexander looked like she had just punched him. Guilt flashed in his eyes. I searched for her, Olivia. He rubbed a hand over his face, his composure breaking. I had nothing when she left, but as soon as I built my company, I hired private investigators. I wanted to find her, to fix whatever had gone wrong. He let out a bitter chuckle. But she didn't want to be found. Olivia's heart clenched. That part she could believe. Her mother had never talked about the past, never mentioned a love story, a lost relationship, because she had been hiding. But from what? Alexander leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. Tell me the truth, Olivia. Did she ever talk about me? Olivia hesitated, then shook her head. Never. Alexander's jaw tightened, but he nodded as if he had expected that. Then there's only one way to get answers. Olivia frowned. What do you mean? His voice was steady. I need to know why she left, and the only way to do that is for you to find out. Olivia's stomach twisted. He wanted her to dig into her mother's past? I don't know if I can do that, she admitted. Alexander's expression softened. I'm not asking for your trust overnight. I just want the chance to be in your life. He exhaled, as if saying the words took effort. I lost your mother. I don't want to lose you too. Olivia looked down at the picture again, emotions crashing over her like a storm. For years, she had thought she was alone, that her father didn't exist. Now she had a choice. Did she walk away, pretend this never happened? Or did she take the risk and step into the world of a billionaire who was claiming to be her father? She took a shaky breath and finally spoke. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Alexander. He nodded slowly. Then take your time. He pulled a card from his pocket and placed it in front of her. Whenever you're ready, call me. Olivia stared at the card as he stood up. Goodbye, Olivia. And just like that, he was gone. She sat there, staring at the picture, the business card, the life she never knew she had. Her entire world had changed. And deep inside, she knew this wasn't over. It was just the beginning.